You have to get out of the environment. You cannot heal and get better if you are in the environment that made you sick. No matter what anybody gives you on like healing, detoxing, rebuilding, all of that, if you're still living in that environment, you're going to waste your money and it's not going to actually move you forward.
This trauma is very real, and it's physical and mental trauma. You know, I see it firsthand. I witness it. I pull up to people's homes, $1 million homes, and they're living in the RV out front with all of their children. Welcome back to the Mold Show. I am your host, Adam Horn, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Sean McGrath. Today we have a special guest, Ashley. What's up, Ashley? How have you been?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Oh, just great. Like I literally ran to the office to the setup to be here on time. I didn't want you waiting on me, but that's the life out there in the field sometimes. And
yeah, mold's got us running around, right? So Ashley, really appreciate you coming on. When you reached out, I was super interested in some of the things you shared with us. Love for you to kind of share your story of what got you into this world that is mold.
Yeah. So kind of like we were talking before we hit record, is I feel like most of us who are in this business of the mold toxicity space never got here intentionally. It's just something happened and life kind of brought you to it. And that's kind of my story, is like my whole background. I've been in the fitness and wellness space for like 20 years. And back in 2018, I was living in Dunedin. You guys know Dunedin, right by the water out there.
Love Dunedin.
Yeah, I love downtown Dunedin, Safety Harbor, all those places. And I loved where I was at. I was in a little apartment, and about 6 months into it, I started having really weird health stuff come up. Not even like the typical like sinus and allergy type things, but like stuff where I would be in a dead sleep, wake up just in the middle of the night with like 150 beats per minute with my heart for no reason. And then I was having stuff with my gut, and then I was having stuff with my hormones, and then I was having vertigo and dizziness and anxiety and panic attacks and food sensitivities and all these things. And nobody could figure out what was going on because, I was highly active. I ate super clean, vitamins and supplements. I, quote unquote, was living a very healthy lifestyle. And I can't tell you, and I'm sure this is similar to a lot of the people you guys talk to and a lot of the people I work with, is I went from doctor to specialist to hormone specialist, ENT specialist. I thought I all of a sudden had like severe allergies being in Florida, all kinds of stuff. And every person had a different diagnosis, but even with that, the protocols they gave me weren't helping. So I had one doctor that told me it was adrenal fatigue, which could have been, but like that's not really like the full picture. Another doctor told me it was just hormone imbalances and tried to put me on like HRT. Another doctor asked if I was diabetic, because one of the things, and we'll dive into all this with mold toxicity, is mold toxicity affects the leptin receptors. So a lot of people have issues with unexplained weight loss or weight gain and blood sugar dysregulation. So just this constant, and this went on for like a year, and the amount of times I like sat in my car feeling so frustrated because I'm like, there's seriously something wrong, and it is making no sense why all these doctors can't really find anything. And I can look back and laugh now because I'm through it, and a lot of my clients appreciate this, but like there's so many times I drove myself to the ER thinking I was like having a heart attack and dying because of how bad the symptoms were. So long story short, I ended up like, after thousands and thousands of dollars and nobody being able to tell me what was going on, I started my own research of just trying to connect the dots of like, I was paying attention to like my patterns of like, all right, I feel the worst at night, which is when I'm home the most. Like there is something here that I'm reacting to. And that's when I discovered mold toxicity. So I ordered my own mold test. My background, I'm board certified in integrative health. I've done functional nutrition for a long time. So I ordered the urine mycotoxin test, and when it came back, as odd as it sounds, with super high toxic levels of like ochratoxin, citrinin, gliotoxin, zearalenone, I actually had like a huge sense of relief because it finally felt like I had some answers and was going to start to get on the right track. So through that whole journey, I ended up like starting my own detox protocol, doing my own kind of experiments of figuring out like how to heal from this, how to rebuild my immune system, my gut, mental health, hormone system, and reset everything. And then after going through that journey, because of how frustrating it was for me, now that's the area that I've chosen to kind of specialize in to help other people because it's still so dismissed as not a real thing. And there's a lot of people out there who are very sick with very serious health problems that aren't able to find anybody who understands it from a root cause medicine perspective, but also going through it myself and knowing the toll it takes physically, mentally, and emotionally. So that's kind of how I ended up here and on y'all's show.
So you mentioned that you kind of found mold illness and started looking into it that way. What did you stumble upon that made you think, are all these weird symptoms I'm dealing with, could it be my house?
Yeah, so the main thing that would happen is because of what I do and working from a computer and work from home is I always sat I'm somewhere totally different now, but I always sat in this one little space next to my kitchen, and when I would sit there within like 20 minutes, I'd start sneezing like crazy. I would get really bad vertigo and like the snot and the nose running would just be crazy. And I would like it would come on so quickly I would go to stand up and it's kind of the feeling like you're buzzed, even though like you haven't had anything to drink, almost like you're like walking on a cruise ship. And so one day, like this kept happening. But what I noticed is when I would step outside and I would like get in the car and head to the gym, all of a sudden it would start to clear up. And this happened for weeks where I was like, what in the world is going on? And I mean, I'm sure you guys have this too. There was no visible mold. Nobody else in the home was responding, so that was making it harder too because I was the only one having symptoms and getting sick. So the main thing was that there was a very big connection between I felt the worst at home and I felt better when I would get outside or when I would go somewhere else. So that's when I started kind of wondering like, am I allergic to like something that's coming in the house? Like, is there something here? That kind of tipped me off in the beginning.
Yeah, I think environmental factors are the last thing most people think about.
Yeah.
You know, it's so easy to get caught up in the litany of things that could be going wrong with our bodies.
Mhm.
You know, and it's very, very easy to get into that space where you're playing whack-a-mole and the anxiety that comes with that. Just the general anxiety of the fears that are associated with your health that everybody deals with.
Mhm.
You know, so what you're describing is very consistent with what I hear from a lot of my clients. You know, and ultimately their journeys are different. You know, but you know that the story me and Sean have heard it several times on this podcast where people are made to feel crazy. You know, or like you know, it's in your
Yeah.
head, that type of stuff. Is such a common response for you know a lot of people to have, especially when everybody around you seemingly is not symptomatic whatsoever, or at
Yeah.
least they're not paying attention to the symptoms. Maybe.
Well, and that's the hardest part, and I've had so many calls when there's very specific testing and labs that I'll have people do, both from like the mycotoxin testing, but also from just looking at how the body is handling it or not handling it. And every single person, like, we'll get on a call, I pull up their test results. I'm like, hey, so you have severely high levels of this, and this. And then I'm going through it, and it'll be like 45 minutes. And after all of that, they're like, so I'm not crazy. I'm like, "You're not crazy." It's like that's all they wanna hear because their family and friends, like you said, nobody else is sick, and they start to have issues where they stop talking about it because people are like, "You're just stressed. You're just" now they're just making this all up in their head. Nobody is that sensitive, but then they're having the same experience with doctors who they go from doctor to doctor, and they're like, "Oh, I think you're just having an anxiety or panic attack." That shortness of breath, that tightness in your chest, that dizziness and vertigo, that's just stress. And then they get sent to a psychiatrist or a therapist and given like anti-anxiety meds and sleep stuff. So for a lot of people, and even like my experience too, it's very frustrating when intuitively, like we all know our body and we know when it's like stress or whatever we're being diagnosed with. And when we're like, no, like there's something else and it's hard. But yeah, like I hear that from a lot of people of just like, thank you for just validating what I can't get anybody else to believe. Nobody
Yep.
believes them.
Oh, you mean the doctors will treat the symptom and don't care whatsoever about the cause?
Yeah. They'll just
Wow.
write you what? Why would my doctor just write me a prescription? Your doctor cares, but he doesn't really care. They care about making money and that's about it. Like, that's the hard part for people to wrap their head around is like, why would my doctor tell me to I just had I feel like half of what I do is I have to educate people because doctors aren't educating them. I just had a call yesterday with a client, so it's crazy. And this is a very common story. Late 30s, early 40s, very healthy, highly active, no health history whatsoever. Had a mini stroke, blood clot, asthma, lupus, fluid around her lungs. And because of that, she's having a hard time breathing. So she went to the doctor. Doctor put her on blood thinners because they're like, we don't know, like blood thinners are going to fix it. And then the other doctor prescribed her a very high dose of anti-anxiety meds because they assumed it was stress. And so we got on the call and she was like, hey, so I just want to run some of this medication by you. This is what they gave me and here's what they said why. And I was like, did they explain to you what happens if you take that anti-anxiety medication? What happens to your brain? They're like, no, what happens? I'm like, your brain stops producing serotonin and GABA because the medication does it. And if you ever try to get off of it, your brain becomes addicted to it the same way people get addicted to drugs. And she was like, what? Why? But my doctor would never prescribe something like that. I'm like, unfortunately, like, yes, they would because they're not concerned about healing you because if they heal you, then you're no longer a patient. They're concerned about here, this will solve your symptoms and manage it temporarily, but it's not actually going to put you on the path to healing.
I have a prediction with how fast technology is changing and the fact that we're having supercomputers in our hands and in our homes now, and eventually you could extrapolate to the point where our homes will be smarter, or whatever we have in our homes will help us analyze the industrial stressors, including molds
Yeah.
and mycotoxins and VOCs and EMFs and anything in the building, right? And that coupled with our own internal universe of biohealth, which will likely be scanned every time you use the restroom or on a monitor that you wear to sleep. We're going to look back on this time like the same way our ancestors look back in time, like in such a primitive way, because
Yeah.
it is everything is treated with the hammer. Oh, you are displaying all of these symptoms, your nervous system related issues and anxiety, a panic attack, all of those things is a sign that your nervous system ultimately is overworked, and then ultimately putting you in a state of flight. And instead of asking why,
Right.
or even listing 10 reasons why, they will immediately sedate you and look to alter your internal hormonal chemistry and brain chemistry permanently, or at least for the long run. And that's not just a mold thing. I mean, that's a conversation that needs to be had in this country, period, because I get it. Liability is a thing, and doctors have to think in sometimes the worst case scenario. And so they only have one tool, and that's the only one they use. And there's no time for them to figure it out because they work for a firm or whatever. Their business model is just horrific. It's just about, the turnstile. And because of that, we all suffer, and nothing's covered. And your insurance doesn't want you spending any time with anybody. They don't want them running blood panels and tests, because they're just not going to cover them at that point, either. So anything out of the norm isn't covered by your insurance. So
I mean, that's the hardest part is, because that's always a question is like, will insurance cover this? And I'm like, unfortunately, no, because insurance doesn't see this as necessary, even though this is the thing that's going to get you the answers so you can start healing. But yeah, the same is true. I mean, like you said, it's not just about mold toxicity. The same is true. I have conversations all the time with women on birth control and people going on HRT. And then when I finally explain to them like what this does to their hormones, like, hey, if you go on birth control, that means your body's not going to make any hormones and you're going to have a whole issue of, well, why do I feel certain ways? And now I have gut problems. And they're like, wait, nobody explained to me that birth control and HRT like shuts off my own hormone production. And I'm like, yeah, you need to start asking questions. And I think like The bigger picture is, and that I always try to drive home to people, is like, you have to be your biggest advocate in everything. Like, you're probably going to need, like with what you guys do, there's still a lot of home inspectors out there that don't believe mold is a real thing, and they'll do just basic testing and they're like, you're good to go ahead and buy the house. It's not a big deal. Where I'm like, hey, what all did they test? Like, what exactly did they do? Because you need to make sure you have somebody that's certified that knows the health risk of mold and not just like checking the list to make a real estate deal or anything like that. Um, but yeah, I think this whole experience is very interesting. Unfortunately, with technology and our little mini computers being at our hands, the positive is more and more people are getting educated because they have the tools that we didn't have 10 years ago to start asking questions of going to the doctor and like, and this is the other problem. Now they're going to the doctor because they're learning about mold, how it is to human health. And they're like, hey, I think this might be mold. Can you test it? And all their doctors, including their functional medicine doctors, are like, well, I don't really know what that is or what to do with that. Like, I don't know. Here, do this cleanse and like, there you go. But I mean, unfortunately, like the more educated we get, like people are going to have to start figuring out how to really heal people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I say we're kind of at the beginning
Mhm.
with this. Go ahead, Sean.
No, one of the points Ashley made about being your own advocate, especially what made me think of it is our side of things. And you brought up the home inspector and real estate type situation. And I think where we were at last week, Adam, is a perfect example of that. Um, a family that did have a home inspection done and did have a mold inspection done. It was really just a few tests throughout the house. Some air samples that even showed molds like chetomium that should have been red flags because it showed up in multiple areas, but they
Mhm.
couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And it took us all of what 5 minutes, Adam, to
Yeah.
figure out there were significant issues in that basement. It looked like it had flooded.
We're just one
in
of
the,
one of those where odor should tell you, where
exactly.
you don't
Yeah.
even, not that you don't need the sample, but when you walk in, you can be pretty certain that there's been some type of event in that space because it doesn't smell right.
Yep.
And the client knew in her gut,
Yeah, and
so
she
she didn't
she
trust it.
she even knew. I had this conversation with this particular client, and I've had it with many other clients too. And I feel like this could be a path to change in this industry, especially on the real estate side of things, where
Mhm.
the realtor wants no red flags. They
Mhm.
don't want the home inspection to come back with anything. Either side, by the
Mhm.
way, the seller or the buyer. They want smooth sailing, and
Right.
they're usually the ones to refer the home inspector because that home inspector isn't going to look very deep. And so
Mhm.
it's just all about greasing the wheels in that industry, unfortunately. But the banks
About
Yeah.
are,
protecting themselves and not
yeah,
their clients.
right. The banks are equal to this party. They should know better too. They're
Yeah.
the ones who are lending the money to people to purchase these. Even a modest home is expensive now, and
Mhm.
these long term investments. And these 4-point inspections are a joke. And
Oh yeah.
ultimately, if the purpose of a 4-point inspection is to determine whether or not you're going to have some type of landfall event where, oh my God, I have to replace a roof, or oh my God, I have to replumb this house, or oh my God, there's an issue with the foundation that could cost me tens of thousands of dollars. Not considering the water side of it, which could absolutely blow all of those out of the water if you're talking about a cost situation.
Mhm.
But from the perspective of I can live in my house when I'm having a roof put on it versus I have to vacate, potentially throw away a lot of my belongings, completely move out of the property, potentially gut a large portion of the interior of the space,
Mhm.
bathrooms, kitchens, huge financial repercussions for what water damage
Yeah.
can come with. Forget about, and I don't mean forget about it, but let's put aside the sensitivity you have. There should be a different focus on this industry when it comes to water and water damage events
Yeah.
because of the scale of those things.
I am fighting this right now, and I did a whole video that I'll put out there on YouTube. So we're out here in California right now. We're in an Airbnb, and we've only been here like a week. 30 minutes we walked into the house. So here's the positive thing. When you've been through mold toxicity health-wise, I say it's positive, like see it however you want, silver lining. Your body is very smart. So when you've been through anything, any kind of trauma, this is what PTSD is. When it senses you might be back in a unsafe situation, it will alert you and let you know. So we got here like a week ago to this Airbnb, and within 30 minutes of walking into it, I told my boyfriend, I was like, I think there's mold in here. And he's like, why? I was like, the second we stepped through that door, I got vertigo, felt a little bit off. Like I know the feelings and the symptoms. And he was like, oh, that's weird. Like, I don't really notice anything. And we're walking around and I'm like, I would bet all the money I have. So I text the Airbnb owner. I was like, hey, like, I know this is kind of random. Has there ever been water damage? You know, all the questions. She's like, no, not that I know of. I'm like, all right. So we give it 24 hours and that like there's a specific spot in the kitchen. And I was like, it's almost like an invisible line. When I step in this space, immediately like things start happening. Like I just start feeling things and I'm like, God, like I can't get over this. So very basic. And I mean, I would love y'all's opinion on this because from my experience, I see this both ways. So just a simple air test is not normally what I suggest to people. However, because if there is mold, sometimes those will come back false negatives because it's not picking up on it if it's somewhere else. However, a lot of times if it's bad mold, it's going to pick up on stuff in the air really quickly, but I always suggest you get a professional thing. So because we're traveling, I told my partner, I was like, these aren't like my favorite test. I was like, but I can tell, like, so it's the part of like, I just need to like let her know. So we tested it, man, like I have them sitting over here on the counter. The amount of multiple mold that is in the air throughout, and I knew it like throughout the kitchen, the master bedroom, the closet. And also I sent her a picture of this too, because her thermostat is at 80% humidity. That right there, I'm like you've got mold, like yeah. Yeah, I was like, you've got 80% humidity. It smells damp, but also like these pictures. So what's happening though, I submitted it to her. She refused the cancellation and the refund and sent me this long message. She was like, I think you just have an allergy and a sensitivity, even though I sent the test plates. So I went to Airbnb. Now I'm having to fight it with Airbnb, and it's everything that you guys are saying. The problem is she doesn't want to have the expense and the issue that now in the state of California, I'm not sure if Florida requires this or not. If you have a mold issue, every time somebody tries to stay in your home or you go to sell it, you have to give them an addendum. There has been known mold here that's been toxic. So I'm like, man, I already know she is trying to get out of this so that she doesn't have to do that if she ever tries to sell the property. If she tries to rent to anybody else, she has to notify them that there is known toxic mold in the house that is harmful to human health. But I mean, going through all this stuff, it's just crazy that I'm like, I can't believe people still don't take this seriously. And they think just like, oh, it's not a big deal, like mold's everywhere. It's like you have like 6 different types in the air in your home, and you have somebody staying here letting you know they're getting sick, and you're still just like, nah, no, I don't believe that. So like, with being your own advocate, like I think I hear from more mold inspectors and people who are having this issue of being dismissed than of people who are like, oh yeah, no, they took it seriously. But to your point, yeah, it's a financial cost. Realtors and real estate agents and banks and all that, they just want to do the business transactions, and they're not actually looking into like, number one, what's the right human thing to do? Like if there's a problem, just like if you had an animal that you knew was like infected with some virus, you don't sell that meat to somebody that can make them sick just to make money. Like it's just, this could go down a whole other rabbit hole of society. And like, I think we've lost our moral compass as a whole. And that really just like getting back to the basics of like respecting other people have health issues. If your home or environment is causing health issues, your job and moral obligation is to correct it and do the right thing. But yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people have to fight that.
It goes even deeper, and you're not wrong. It starts with the quality of build, and and the word quality,
Yeah.
is a broad term.
Yeah.
What quality means anymore in building any structure is a joke. And so,
Gosh, yeah.
ultimately, and people will be sick of me saying this, but I just look at wet spaces and how they're designed, and they're not designed intelligently, and they're not designed to get wet. And that should tell you a lot about the building process, and ultimately, what the incentive it is for for builders to build things that are going to last. They don't care, because
Yeah.
we're going to live in a society where lasting isn't even a conversation anymore. It's all about how quick, how cheap, is it going to look, good enough for if it's passable from that term.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys deal with people too, the common misconception of new homes can't have mold because they're
Mhm.
new. And to your point, I've had so many people who, because homes are just slapped together now, I had one whoever installed the HVAC didn't put a drip pan in there, brand new. So mold's just like growing all throughout their vents and on everything. And then the other one, this brand new home, whoever laid the tile in the shower and the drain pipe never put anything in there to seal it off and to properly funnel out. Mold started growing like up through the tile. And it's like, God, like you said, like everybody, the quality of it, it's just like, hurry up, 30 days, rinse, repeat, sell, get somebody in there instead of like, let's take our time and actually build something that is going to be a home for somebody.
Adam, you mentioned quality being a huge question of how you define it here recently. I've even noticed they're changing how you define what water damage is too in real estate transactions. I don't know if you've noticed that. You'll go to a house where there's maybe if I explain what I mean, you'll understand. You'll go to a house and do an inspection on a real estate transaction, and you'll see things that are very obvious patchwork from previous water damage events that weren't listed on the disclosure. And when you ask the seller about this, all of a sudden it's, oh yeah, well that was just, this minor thing, blah, 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 blah. But it was from a leak, very obvious leak. So they're kind of making up their own definition now too of what maybe a serious or not serious water event could be when all of it can lead to mold issues.
And the truth is, the realtor doesn't know. The realtor can only go
Yeah.
by what the seller or the homeowner knows. And in
Well,
some
I'm saying
cases,
they'll go back to the actual seller or the homeowner, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden it's, that wasn't a big deal. It was just blah, 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 but it was a leak. It was a water event.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the purposes of this podcast. Water event should be an enormous red flag. It should be like a landmine,
Yeah.
in your mind. Water event. And I know, because before there was a mold industry, there was just a water industry. And I used to dry structures for a living. And I get called out 3 days after the water damage event or the night of the water event. My meters and my thermal cameras and my technology can tell me a story. That story is one thing on day one. It's a different thing on day two. It's a completely different thing on day 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 days down the road. At that point, I don't really know what got wet. Unless the damage tells me the story, I can only go based on my visual cues and what my meters are telling me. And so these events all could mean a lot of things. When
Yeah.
you're talking about plies of material and you can't see how far the water went or into what space, or always in your mind, draw a circle around a wet space. Well, the ice maker line leaked. Draw a circle around not just the wall behind the ice maker, but the pantry behind it, or the closet behind it, or this or that. And that's just how you need to view it. And then think about going up 4 feet, because those materials are likely going to absorb and suck stuff up. And then the flooring, and in which direction did the floor lean, and in what direction did the water take that? And so, though, even a small event, even a gallon of water,
Right.
soaking in behind materials can cause an issue where spores are bioavailable. I keep on saying this. They're the enemy once they've grown into a colony. But ultimately, it's not their fault. They're there. We live on Earth. Spores are just in our environment. Growth ultimately is going to be the result if you have a water damage event, and then you do have a problem with mold at that point. So it is about focusing on even the small details when you're looking at properties or projects, or when you're in that hotel or that Airbnb, because you don't know how large of an event that was and what they did to cover it up ultimately, whether or not the person went in was qualified. And you talk about people taking it seriously. People in our own industry don't take it seriously.
Yeah.
People in industries that deal with air quality, like air conditioning contractors, they're the worst. They don't take it seriously at all. And they give people false sense of security all the time by like, if you're worried about it, I'm just going to install this light or this or this or this.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the pedestal that the HVAC is sitting on, that the air travels through all day long, is an absolute cave of wonders, and
Yeah.
everything that you could possibly not want growing in and around your fresh air is there. So those are also problems too.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want to get back to your initial story, Ashley.
Sure. Yeah,
That was
yeah,
a really
sure.
good
Ron, were you like
discussion.
that? I like to go
But I
off
want to
and take it on tangents.
No,
It's
I
okay.
want to correlate with what we're talking about here, back to that. Because when it comes to addressing a home, there's so many different systems sometimes that need to be addressed, right, Adam?
Yep.
You've got the mold itself, the water damage itself. Sometimes there's structural issues. A lot of times you have to address the ventilation system, um, whatever caused the source to begin with. So sometimes that can be a huge financial burden, but sometimes dealing with all these things are enough to make people crazy. And when you were talking about your story there, you mentioned a lot of different systems in your body that you had to deal with and correct in order to move on to that next phase and feel better. How can people go about dealing with all those different things without going crazy? Because it can be so overwhelming, confusing, cause a lot of anxiety, taking the proper steps to get better.
Yeah, so it is hard. But I mean, that's why I do what I do to try to simplify it because a lot of times people start doing, I can't tell you how many detox and supplement protocols and this doctor this and that doctor this and then antifungals and all this stuff. And it's very, very important. I always try to stress to people like you have to go in the right order. So, number one, you have to get out of the environment. I'm sure we're aligned similar to you guys on that of like you cannot heal and get better if you are in the environment that made you sick no matter what anybody gives you on like healing, detoxing, rebuilding, all of that, if you're still living in that environment, you're going to waste your money and it's not going to actually move you forward. So that's what I always say is number one, you have to get out of the environment. Even if you go to a friend's house, family's house, doesn't matter. Just get some fresh air, which is what I did too. And like, I know it's hard because like you mentioned, Adam, of like, sometimes you do have to get rid of a lot of your belongings if they got contaminated, and that's what's making you sick. So there's like a whole process of figuring out what all got contaminated, getting that out of there, and then you kind of start the healing process physically, which the very first step in the healing process that I have people go through is the gut is like our exit hole for everything. Mycotoxins, unfortunately, completely disrupt that. So what happens with most people dealing with mold is your gut has the lining that should keep the integrity of it so that when it's trying to excrete toxins through our urine and our bowel movements, you get all these microscopic tears because the mycotoxins release histamines and inflammation, and then all those toxins that should be coming out get reabsorbed back into the bloodstream and the cells, which is what causes a lot of the problems. So you have to heal the gut to make sure that it can handle a protocol. And then after that, you got to just start actively detoxing and binding the mold. Now, in this space, this is where I think a lot of people get frustrated and kind of keep themselves in a vicious cycle of not getting better. Because binders, and I mean, full transparency for me, it took about 1.5 to 2 years of going through a protocol for me to finally get back to feeling 100%. I was on binders before anything else for like a good 6 to 8 months. The binders, what they do, the way I like to explain it is you have all these toxins floating around, and I mean, most of them are neurotoxic, immunotoxic, gut, hormones, nephrotoxic, everything, which is why you're having the symptoms. So it's not an allergy problem. It's that the mycotoxins are impacting your immune system. It's not a hormone problem. It's that specifically ones like citrulline and zearalenone impact the endocrine system. So you have all these symptoms that start coming up and you feel like, man, I take care of one thing and then another one pops up because it impacts all these things. So when we actively detox and bind these things, the binders kind of act almost like a magnet. So all that stuff that's been reabsorbing back into your bloodstream, it is actively flushing it out. That's like the very beginning. And what happens for most people that shocks them is we do the urine mycotoxin test in the beginning. And the reason we do that is because it lets me know which strains we're dealing with, because there are specific binders and protocols depending on the strains. But it also shows me how well or not well your body is actively flushing these things out. When we then have somebody start on binders, usually those numbers go way up, like 3 to 5 times. And the reason that happens is because now you're seeing all that stuff that was causing all of your symptoms actively getting excreted. So The first part of this is usually I have somebody start on very targeted binders after they've healed their gut. And then when they're in a place that they're less symptomatic, part of healing the protocol is antimicrobials, killing off the fungus because mold is a fungus. And so the way it grows in the air and in your home, it also grows in your body, unfortunately. And then from there, it's like, okay, do you need some help with your other systems and supporting and rebuilding things? The biggest reason most people stay stuck is because they're not on binders long enough. They didn't properly prepare the gut and the drainage pathways, so the lymphatic, the kidney, the livers, or they jumped on antifungals and antimicrobials way too soon. And I mean, as you guys know, it would be kind of similar if you saw something with a little bit of mold and you just went and sprayed a little bleach on that area and wiped it off and you think you cleared out the mold. It's going to come right back and it's probably going to come back with a vengeance. It's the same thing when people are hopping on these antifungals or itraconazole and all the things that are typically prescribed in this is they go on it. They usually feel worse because it just flares everything up. And then now they have a bigger mold problem. So that's kind of like the brief overview of how do you start with it is number one, you get out of the environment. Number two, you have to fix your gut. And then number three, you start on a very targeted detox protocol, depending on what the test results come back with on the mycotoxins.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're, sorry, go ahead, Adam.
I was gonna say, and I'm assuming every single person responds differently because it starts with like how you metabolize those types of things.
Yeah. There's a whole genetic factor that gets into that. Men and women are different. It has to go with like, where was your immune system health prior to that? Like this happens more often than not where I've got a husband and wife living in the same thing. The husband is having gut problems, constipation, a little bit of anxiety and stress. The wife is like flatlined on her hormones. She can't sleep. She's getting nauseous and having like an allergic reaction. So their symptoms end up being very different. Their protocols are very different. And then which symptom goes away first, how they heal is also very different. And I think this is why it gets so confusing because everybody has a different reaction. Some people it's allergic. They just have like bad sinus issues. Other people like myself, it's vertigo, dizziness, heart palpitations. So everybody's always like confused because it's, well, I live in the same home and I have these symptoms, but they don't have that. It's like, doesn't mean they don't have any symptoms, but that chronic migraine they can't get rid of, or that insomnia that won't go away, like everybody's body responds differently.
Yeah, and I would assume too that it's not always the smoking gun. It may be causing a percentage of your issues, but you may have other factors, like stress is a real factor.
Yeah.
You could also be dealing with this, or this, and that, and the binding away or the, going on these protocols can help, but it may not always take care of 100% of your issues because we're very complicated.
Yeah.
The husband could be dehydrated all the time. It could have issues. Like I'm assuming that there are lots of different dominoes that can cause these effects. Which is why I think it's so easy for people in the standard medical industry to just brush it off because you have all these other factors that's where their expertise is, or that's the only focus they know is to talk about these other things.
Well, and this could also go on a very deep psychological, spiritual, energetic thing of which I won't, but it could.
It could.
So one of the things I asked, so like typically if somebody comes to me, hey, Ashley, I think I have mold toxicity. I want to do the test. I have them fill out a very thorough like assessment and intake form. And one of the things I ask is, have you recently been through any emotional or mental? The reason I ask that is because there is definitely a significant connection to two things that I find over and over that always surprises me that doctors never address and I actually noticed this years ago back when I was in like the fitness, like wellness space people, when they would be like, I just put on like 100 pounds, I can't lose weight. How long ago did this start? Which is always a question I ask with mold toxicity people. And they're like, it started in 2017. I don't start diving into like the health stuff. I ask them what was going on in their life in 2017. Almost everybody has something. I got a divorce, I changed jobs, I had to move, my dad died, my mom died, my dog, this, that. Something that disrupted the body's balance because I mean, I definitely, especially with what I do, believe, the body holds a lot of our emotional energy and emotional stress. When you are not giving all of that a proper outlet, your body has to also process all of your mental health and emotional health. So, people who are carrying a lot of grief, typically, whenever the thing that caused the grief will also have some sort of physical correlation of weight gain, weight loss, not sleeping, adrenal fatigue, all of those things. Same is true with like other stresses. So, yeah, so I always ask that first of like, hey, so like I saw your intake form, I saw the health history stuff and all the testing you sent over what other doctors ran, but like before we get into all that, like just tell me the story because usually you can find something in that story and it's like, oh yeah, like this started and like my mom got really sick and now I'm the caretaker for her and then like a couple months later was when a lot of these health problems started coming up. And I'm just kind of going down like the coach role of like, how are you doing processing that? And they're like, it's really stressful. I'm like, do you have a therapist? So yes, there's that piece that always has the connection. And then the other piece that you would think is like a basic question in health and the medical industry and foundation. None of these doctors ask them what they're eating every day. That's like the first thing on our call. I'm like, all right, like run me through what you're eating every day. And they're like, oh, I have breakfast. Like it's usually this. And I'm like, no, no, no. Like I need to know like exactly what you're eating. And then we get into it. And because I mean, I can put all this into like a software and do like a nutritional analysis, but I'm like, I can tell you right now, you are not either eating enough of the right macronutrients, being your protein, carbs, and fats, or you're not getting enough of these nutrients. And it's like, that's such a basic thing because the immune system in the body runs on fuel. If you're not giving it that, it can't help you. And like, this is coming up like with weight loss and all the GLP-1s and Ozempic is people are starving their bodies. And then they're like, I don't know what's happening. My hair is falling out. I don't know what's happening. I can't sleep. And I'm like, what did you eat today? I had 300 calories. I had a protein shake. And I'm like, your immune system can't function and fight off all this stuff if you are not properly fueling. So like there is a piece of it that's very complex that I do with people of like, all right, you're starting to have this flare up. We need to support this system. Here's some nutrients and all that. But in the very beginning, it's kind of just like having a real human conversation of what is going on in other areas of your life. And then the second piece is just basic anatomy and physiology. Like, what are you fueling your body with, or what are you not fueling to the point that your body can't fight this? Because this is why we get tired when we're sick, because all that energy that would go external is internal to try to help you fight off whatever is going on. And like, for some reason, we don't make that connection of you can't be under eating and expect your immune system and the rest of your body to work efficiently.
It all sounds so much like common sense, and
Yeah.
and sleep being the other factor, and I'm sure there's a a list of the primary things that you have to start with, and how the trickle down effect works,
Mm-hmm.
and then expose a person who's fighting all those battles to a non-visible toxin that they're sleeping next to or working next to,
Mm-hmm.
or exposing themselves to for 18 hours a day or 16 hours a day, and the ramifications, as you know and as we know, can be dire.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel validated with your trauma point, Ashley, not because I've been through it myself. That's not the validation, but because I bring it up all the time with Adam, because that is something I've noticed with clients too. There's always something traumatic in someone's life that kind of kick-started the health issues, whether it's pregnancy, death in the family, had someone who was in great health, even though they were in a moldy house. I say great. They probably dealing with stuff they just didn't realize it yet. But she had a concussion and that kind of sent things over the edge with her body. So just something that I always think about because I've seen it so often. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously that's outside my realm of expertise and just an observation on my end
Well,
while we're
I
playing
have a
doctor
bit
on
of
the home.
I have a bit of a theory behind that, because trauma often results in you becoming so inward focused
Mm-hmm.
that maybe these symptoms have been there for years,
Mhm.
and now you're starting to really analyze yourself or overanalyze in the case of trauma, all these things. But
Mhm.
sometimes the focus becomes how you feel, and you can become hyper focused on those things. And that's sometimes when people realize that they have these issues, and then they can start putting the puzzle pieces together and talk to somebody like Ashley, who's can open up an entire world. And I'm sure it's very overwhelming to them in regards to, holy shit, I never considered it, or maybe I thought about it, but I was told it was nothing to worry about.
Well, it's so interesting because I mean, I'm very much like my brain in everything in life. I have to understand the why, even prior to getting into like root cause medicine. Like if I have a fight with somebody, I need to know like what was the start of it, the trigger. That way we can solve it and never have that again. So anytime, especially like continuing ed, you have to renew all your boards and all that and all the stuff of the latest and greatest stuff in functional medicine and integrative health. Some of it I always question because, so for example, to your point, Adam, and your theory is one of the therapies that have come out recently in helping people with these ongoing chronic health issues is LDN. It's a low dose, like anti-inflammatory, not really an immune blocker, but kind of. And the way that it works, so with anything that I have people do, I always explain to them what it's doing, and then I just let them make their own decision because I want you to know everything so you're making choices on your own path. But it's prescription medication, and I was looking into it and like the recent studies because a lot of people come to me who have been prescribed it. And the way that it works is it temporarily will block the endorphin receptors in the brain so the brain thinks it doesn't have enough endorphins, and then it will upregulate and produce more endorphins in the brain, which are endorphins are our natural painkillers and immune system responders. So when I'm working with clients and they're taking this low dose therapy or they talk to me about what's been going on, and then we talk about just life's like getting internal focused. Sometimes I just ask them, I'm like, when's the last time you felt really happy? And they're like, what does that have to do with it? And I'm like, well, I mean, we have happy hormones. You're taking a medication to help with endorphins. I would love to find a way to do that in your everyday life so that you're not having to continue to rely on prescription medications. And like endorphins can be released through exercise. It can be released through doing something, socializing, or just being happy. But that happens. And then at the same time, the interesting thing in what you were saying is in helping people heal, I have to have real conversations with them about 6 to 9 months into their healing protocol where a lot of their symptoms are almost gone and they're not having anything. And now they're like on the other side where they'll bring stuff up like, hey, what do you think about this? I saw this video. And we have to have a conversation where I tell them that for a long time, their sickness has been the thing that's occupied their mind and their life. And their hobby has been Googling their symptoms and researching everything that's wrong with them, that I have to almost like baby step push them back out into living of, hey, instead of tonight, you spending an hour or two on Google and on social media trying to figure out what your symptoms mean, why don't you go take a walk outside or spend some time with your family and spend some time with your friends? But it's like they have been struggling with something. And I mean, all of it could stem right back to like the whole thing, like something traumatic happened. So to distract from having to deal with the emotions of that traumatic thing, we get like obsessed with something else that we can like kind of hyper fixate on.
Mm-hmm.
That in healing, there's a conversation of, I need you to find a new hobby outside of your sickness and the things you've been dealing with. And it's really hard for people. They're like, oh, I don't even know that I realized that this is my new hobby. I'm like, yeah, maybe. And like, they have this whole like spiritual enlightenment like moment where they're like, I don't know that I even realized that I kind of stopped living because I've been so consumed with this thing. So it's very interesting. Like in the beginning, and I mean, I've had to like, everybody is different. Some people I can tell them that straight up. Other people I kind of have to like gently bring up the conversation of like, what did you do this weekend? Did you spend time outside? Did you go talk to a loved one or family member? Like, did you do something that makes you happy? And they're like, no, but I did start Googling and I watched this YouTube video and I think I might have type 2 diabetes. And I'm like, get off social media and go live your life. You
So it's
have to.
so it's interesting you bring that up because we can deal with the same thing from time to time with clients getting hyper fixated, even on the building side of things, even to the extent where they'll bring in several experts, from all over the place, and we all have the same opinion. We're all giving the same guidance, but for some reason there needs to be all these cooks in the kitchen, which can cause a lot of confusion and stress,
Mhm.
and I feel like doesn't do any good.
Ashley, as you were describing that scenario with people, the first thing that came to my mind is people who battle with addiction, because it's the same behavioral trap that a lot of them fall into. Like once
Yeah.
they remove this addiction from their life, finding something to fill their time, their mind, their worry, their whatever it is that they've been ruminating about
Mhm.
24/7 for the last 20 years, and now they're supposed to all of a sudden overnight be this new person. It's what causes relapse for most people. Like they just can't, they're looking to replace that behavior with something else, and
Yeah.
then go down the rabbit hole of to obsess and look to fix and constantly try to find a new thing that becomes the new enemy. So I know that's a severe analogy, but it just popped into my head as you were describing it, because it can be. I mean, this trauma is very real, and it's physical and mental trauma.
Yeah.
I see it firsthand. I witness it. I pull up to people's homes, $1 million homes, and they're living in the RV out front with
Mhm.
all of their children, and the ramifications it causes in their marriage, in their relationship, and to their mental health is not funny. It's not.
Yeah.
It's as severe as it gets. In some cases, people, they don't necessarily recover right away from it. Even post
Mhm.
remediation and moving back into those environments brings back a stress response immediately. It's like
Mhm.
walking back onto the battlefield in a war zone,
Yeah.
and so there are the ramifications can be, reverberate outside of just handling those situations, because
Yeah.
when you do, and I've seen it many times, put all your stuff in a dumpster and start over again, and move away from your forever home and tear your kids
Mhm.
away. Like I see what it does to people, and
Yeah.
it's no fun.
Yeah.
And I I hate to be part of the bearer of bad news in these situations, which is why I feel so passionate about talking about it and
Yeah.
educating people on it ahead of time. Maybe for somebody, maybe they're contemplating purchasing or moving into or whatever, and they've come across to this in some way, and it stops them for a moment to think about, okay, maybe I need to look deeper here, because this is a big investment.
Yeah, I mean, like, 2 parts to that, like, going back to the whole thing with what you were saying with addiction and, like, how this can happen and, like, relapse. I think this is a much bigger problem, and, I mean, unfortunately, the bigger social media gets, the worse it gets. Like, I don't think any of us are ever taught how to handle big emotions, and so what happens is that when we're dealing with those big, scary things, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, going financially broke, the loss of a home, all these things, you don't go to school for that. Like, your parents don't really teach you, like, "Hey, one day you're gonna have the rug pulled out from underneath you, and you're not gonna know what to do. Here's how to feel those emotions without letting them, like, derail you or swallow you." So instead, we know happiness and joy and laughter, and, like, we have good/bad emotions that we have labeled them as. When we experience these big emotions, we don't know how to sit with them, so we distract ourselves because the distraction is less painful than having to actually face the thing that we're going through. So and that's why, going back to the whole, like, when I talk to people, I ask them, "Was there any kind of trauma that happened?" Because it's possible you're not feeling the things through the trauma, and this is just, like, distraction. And I talked to somebody about this recently, whose husband, she's 45, husband passed away suddenly. They don't really know what happened. It just, like, one day she came home, he didn't feel well, and the next day he's gone, and that's all they know. And she's got a kid that's like 8 years old. She's an entrepreneur. And so I was asking her when we caught up, I was like, "How are you doing?" And it's been about 2 years, and she was like, "Well, year 1, I was so busy having to clean up everything of his life and not being here, so you don't think about things like, what do I do with his vehicle? What, I don't even know how to get into the bank accounts because he had all the passwords, things like that." She's like, "So year 1, I was so busy in action just doing. Now that there's no action, now I'm just in it." And that's the problem that I think a lot of people have is when they go through something, yes, there's stress, yes, there's symptoms, yes, there's fatigue, yes, there's all this stuff. But instead of just like sit in those heavy feelings and let it pass and then move on from that, it's like, oh, wait, my body feels funny. Like something's going on. We hyperfixate.
Yeah.
And like, I think though, with what you were saying with like people living in an RV and like having to process that loss and all those things, I think it's interesting because like I have some people who, and myself included, like I found it very liberating, especially the time of my life that I was in where I was very burned out, very stressed out from the other business that I had, that when I needed to get rid of everything and basically start fresh, I felt like a huge, like, just let it all burn, let it go, let me move forward. Where I have found the ones that take longer to heal are the ones that struggle with letting go of things because there's something so much deeper in that. So it's
Mhm.
very interesting seeing how we all process things differently.
You're right, because I do have those clients where when the validation comes, do they be happy to throw the match
Yep.
Hmm.
into the pile and
It's
smile
almost like they're waiting for it.
and drink
Yeah,
a glass
like
of
just move
wine,
on.
right? Drink a glass of wine and just watch it go because
Yep.
they finally do have that validation. So there's definitely two sides of that coin. For sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's
but
very interesting. I'm with you though on just like educating people and like if I could like I'll probably cuz you guys talk to so many people, I talk to so many people and I'm sure every person you have they feel like they are the only one going through this
yeah,
hardship
yeah.
and they're alone. That's what I tell my clients. I'm like I wish I could put you all in like a support group of like, hey, number 1, you're not crazy. Number 2, here's all the other people who are going through the exact same thing because I do think that that's a big struggle is people feel like it's an isolated experience of I'm the only one and it's like no, there are thousands of people all the time that have to go through this.
And I think why so many people aren't willing to open up about it is just the stigma around it, right? Especially with even,
Yeah.
again, the unbelief in our own industry. So it can be quite the hurdle to get over. But
People
we,
don't want the stigma, just like your Airbnb person doesn't want the
hmm
stigma.
Yep.
There are a lot of reasons that people avoid talking about it,
Yep.
and responsibility is one of the biggest ones. And
Yeah.
financial ramifications is probably the biggest one. And I see that in when I walk into the house and it's one spouse versus the other. And it's
Mhm.
usually because financial ramifications are extreme and excessive, and
Yeah.
it's not a cheap proposition to handle all this. When you talk about all the other things, remediation being the beginning of that financial stressor. So
Mhm.
that's a big one. That's a big one.
Yeah. I mean, change is hard. Like I'm big into meditation. I meditate every day, not because I'm trying to get enlightened, but because it keeps me connected to like the truth and
Yes.
what really
hmm
matters. And I try to get my clients to do it. Most of them don't see the point in it because I'm like, you're not meditating to like seek something. Like you're not trying to find something. You're just coming back to yourself to remember like none of this stuff, the house, the material things, like all these things that you're so stressed and worried about, like everything you need is like within yourself. You don't need to worry about that. So, like, yeah, there's financial stresses. Yeah, there's a lot of obstacles and all that. But every time something comes up in life, like, you can't be completely thrown off. Like, you have to find something that is solid in you. So, whether it's mold, whether it's cancer, whether it's some other thing that will happen, because life has ups and downs. If you do not learn how to ground yourself and find your own baseline, I guess, then every time something happens, you're going to have another big disaster and you're going to spiral and it's going to be this big, huge event. But like, I kind of just, my motto is I sit in my meditation. It's been the last 3 weeks has been a little crazy for us, and my boyfriend makes fun of me because every night I'm like, "I need to go meditate or I need to go sit outside for, like, 20 minutes and just, like, breathe and remember what matters," and then I'll come back in. He's like, "Let me guess." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Go ahead and say it," and I'm like, "Everything is always working out in my best interest and for my own personal growth," and he's like, all right. I'm like, and it's true. It's true. Whether it's like you see it 10 years later in hindsight, whether you see it like 24 hours later, like somehow, some way, you see like, oh, it's a good thing we let go of that house and moved here because now we're in an RV, like living it up, traveling the country. Like, oh,
Right.
it's a good thing I got mold toxicity because now I'm able to help other people move on and heal their journey. But like, you got to just work on you regardless of whatever it is. And I mean, that's how I get through all this stuff. Cause I mean, you guys have your own issues in life. We all do. And it's like,
Yeah.
you got to find some sort of grounding.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I
good
mean,
advice that I need to take because, Adam, you
it's
know,
great
what we
advice.
do is stressful, man.
It
So
is.
Yeah.
we have to have that same approach to
Not
what we
only
do.
are we absorbing their stress, but we're absorbing their mold as
Yep.
well. So it's both. You know, we are taking on all those things. And by the way, Ashley, I knew you were going to say you meditated when you were talking earlier. I just could tell it was coming. My wife, who is a yogi, and she's
Oh, nice.
on 800 hours of schooling to teach, and she just did it for her own practice.
Yeah.
She saved me in a lot of ways by showing me a lot of the similar things. You know, I found acceptance and commitment therapy through it, and you know, all the things that come with those, what, you know, new age philosophies, which are just old age philosophies in regards to being able to sit with yourself and your stuff and acceptance and all those things. Sorry, I didn't mean to
No.
call that out, but I knew it. I knew it was coming.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I would say, like, he's not here right now, but, like, my boyfriend would say the same thing because when we first met, like, 6, 7 years ago, gosh, I'm not gonna go into that whole story, but definitely we'll just say, like, I think not necessarily you guys, but I think part of, like, men and maturing and all the things you guys go through is the unveiling of the mask of masculinity, what you think masculinity is versus, like, really what we want is, like, your true self and the vulnerability and the open heart. Um, but similarly, because we met in the
Ashley, are
gym.
you ready to have that podcast?
Let's do another one.
I was about to say, because
Mask of masculinity.
we could do a whole podcast on that alone.
Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, when we met in the gym, we met because some of the workouts I was doing, he was asking questions about it and all this stuff, but he wouldn't work out with me for the longest time because I love Olympic lifting, I love strength training, I love athletic conditioning. And he's like, "No, I'm good. Like, I'm not going to work out with you." And then months and months later, when he finally did, I was like, "What's your deal? Like, why wouldn't you work out?" He was like, "I don't know if I could go home and sit with myself if I do a workout with you and I can't get through it." He's like, "That just does." And I'm like, "All right, I get it." But then I was like, I went on this whole rant similar, I'm sure, to your wife with what yoga is for her.
Mhm.
My workouts are very much a form of meditation for me. So, like, focusing on the present moment, focusing on my breath work, like focusing on, because I mean, I work out hard because I enjoy it. But the reason I work out hard is because my mind, I'm like, if I can get through this workout, I can get through anything. Like, it's just a process. So it has turned into that for him now. When he's dealing with something emotionally, mentally, he'll go work out. He does his like deep breathing and all those things. But it is interesting. Like, maybe all of us females come into y'all's life to just be like, "Hey, welcome to meditation. Like, come get grounded and centered."
Have you seen those? There's like a bunch of little clips out there right now I've seen where the guy will be like, "Yeah, Pilates, whatever," you know, and she's like, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Yeah, no big deal." And then like they show like his
legs like quivering. Yeah.
He gets, right after the class, he's like, looks like he needs to go to the emergency
Yep.
room.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna pass next time. I can't do it.
No,
Yeah.
thank you. Obviously, I saw Pilates from afar. I'm like, I'm not on that level yet. No, thank
Yeah.
you.
That's
Not
all
gonna
right.
happen.
That's all right.
Well, man, this has been great, and I think
I agree.
I think, Sean, I'd love to have you back on because I think we just kind of scratched the surface with a lot of this. I have a lot more questions for you, especially in regards to the processes and what you do. You know, that I'm sure we can dive deeper into.
Yeah.
This.
No, this was great. I love this. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to come on, Ashley. Hopefully we can figure out ways to collaborate in the future too.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Sounds good.
All right. Good night.
Appreciate it. Good night, guys.
Cool.
Just gonna
The content in this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. While our goal is to educate, the hosts are not medical professionals, and the opinions expressed are their own. For any health concerns or questions about mold exposure and its effects, please seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider.